Hi, it's me, Kaity.
And me, Adrian.
And you're listening to KindlED,
a podcast where we dig into the science behind building relationships and environments that help kids unlock their full potential and become empowered learners.
Together, we'll discover evidence-based tools and methods that will enable you to better kindle the curiosity, motivation, and well-being of the young people in your life. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of KindlED. We're so excited to be here with you, and we can't wait to jump in to all of the exciting things we're going to learn and discover together.
I know we have so much to share and learn. I cannot wait. But Kaity, can I share something that's going on in my house right now?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so do your kids play any instruments or do any lessons or anything?
Yeah, they attempt to play the piano, and my son is trying to learn guitar on and off.
Oh, that's super cool. And how's that going?
Good. He's pretty driven to do it, but it kind of like starts and stops a lot. So we're just kind of being supportive, seeing how it goes.
Well, that's exactly what's been going on in my house. So I have a kiddo. I heard this phrase on a podcast and it totally fits him. So I'm kind of just going with it, but he's a spectrum-y, like gifted kid. And because of that, he cannot go to traditional school. We've tried lots of different options. And so he is home educated, and we have private teachers and private tutors at home, including a piano teacher. Kaity, this guy will not let him quit. It's so amazing. So we started back in August or September, and he quickly, just started learning so fast because he was practicing all day, every day on his own. If you would talk to him about it, he would say, I hate piano, I don't like this. And so we just didn't say anything, didn't tell him to practice, just kind of let him do his own thing. And his teacher would come every week. He even went to his recital, completely blew everyone away of how fast and quickly he learned. Then we had a couple weeks off, and with kids like him, it's hard. With routine, if it gets disrupted. And then he just decided he doesn't want his teacher to come anymore. I know, right? But his teacher is like, nope, I'm still coming. So I reached out to him. I told him, I was like, I don't know what to do. He doesn't want to work on this music anymore. He's just very discouraged. And his teacher was at my house within an hour. He didn't bring music with him. All he did was sit at my kitchen table with my son, and they drew pictures of Link, which Link is from Zelda, and that's what my son's really, really into right now. He gets hyper-focused on things, and he doesn't really play the video game because it dysregulates him, but he has read everything about Link and Zelda and this whole world. He'd probably be upset that I don't know the details of all the things that he's been learning, doing crafts, drawing pictures. And so his music teacher is also an art teacher. And so they sat and just talked for an hour and just connected. And then the next day he came for his lesson and was like, you know what? We're not going to do any of the lessons I had planned for you. Let's get some Zelda music. My son was like, okay. So he rewrote Zelda's Lullaby for my son at his level.
What?
Isn't that amazing?
That is really cool.
So awesome. And I wish I could be like, yeah, and then it was all great. And he practices every day and it's amazing. But we keep going on this back and forth journey. But that's part of it too. And his teacher just keeps showing up and is totally open and willing to meet him wherever he is at.
That's incredible, and such a good example of the power of being the kind of adult that understands how to give kids space when they need space, how to come at problems from a variety of interests, and really trying to engage him at an individual level. He could have easily just persisted in his lesson plan, but he was flexible and was really meeting him where he was at. And I just love that.
Yeah, I love that he wasn't forcing him into a box that he clearly does not fit in, which the rest of the world, really tries to do that. And it's pretty amazing and encouraging. And it was helpful for me because sometimes I try to force my child into that box without realizing it.
Totally. We all do that sometimes, for sure.
Absolutely. Okay. You ready to jump into this podcast?
Yeah, let's intro the podcast. So first, some background for our listeners. KindlED is a podcast that's powered by Prenda. Prenda is a company that makes it easy for any inspiring and caring adult to start a micro school, which is a group of 5 to 10 learners meeting in an informal space, doing all sorts of awesome educational things, with the goal of really empowering those learners to love learning and discover their own passions and curiosities and develop the skills and knowledge that they'll need to really go out in the real world and execute on those big dreams and big ideas and big passions. So over the last 5 years, Prenda has helped thousands of kids come on this journey of like being kind of disengaged to really finding their own drive and becoming what we call empowered learners. So along the way, we've helped thousands of adults learn how to kindle a student's love of learning. And with this podcast, we want to share what we've learned through all of the experience and all of the research that we've done. We also want to continue our learning alongside you through talking to people who understand the science behind things like motivation, student autonomy, relationship building, learning, and behavior.
We're also going to talk to inspiring folks who are making a big difference in education and parenting. So some episodes will be Kaity and I going really deep on some awesome topics that we love to nerd out on, and others will be interviewing guests. Then along the way, we'll share our own personal stories and experiences, as well as take questions from listeners and we'll coach you through some of those struggles and challenges.
That's right. So this podcast might be powered by Prenda, but it's meant to help anyone who interacts with young people. If you're a parent, a teacher, a coach, an educational entrepreneur, administrator, Girl Scout leader, community leader, anything, there's definitely something here for you.
So excited. But I do have to ask, what's with the name KindlED, Kaity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's kind of a funny name, and it's inspired by this old Plutarch quote: "The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled." So over at Prenda, we are big believers in the idea that learning is a natural human interest, and it's also a skill. Learning is also a skill. But lots of educational systems and kind of just the way that we treat kids in general these days are actually diminishing their natural curiosity and drive and their ability really to become passionate, capable people. And that's not what we want, right?
No, that's not what we want. We really want kids to be curious and motivated and intrinsically motivated and engaged. We say that we want them to be lifelong learners, but the world we have created for them and the culture in our classrooms and homes don't always support this, right? So what we're doing is we're on a mission to inspire and equip as many adults as we can with the knowledge and skills to really be able to support kids on this journey to know how to kindle the fire within our students and our children.
100%. I couldn't agree more. So can I share a few of my favorite definitions of the word kindle?
Yeah, I didn't even look it up. Of course you would look it up. I love it.
So, obviously the main definition is to help something start burning, right? But it also means to stir up, to cause to glow, or to fuel. Isn't that interesting?
That's very interesting. It's exactly what we're trying to do, right?
Totally. So that's why we're calling this podcast KindlED. And if you are seeing the name KindlED, you'll notice that the ED is emphasized to note the tie-in between our work and the education space. But it's not just education. It also bleeds over into any circumstance where you're interacting with young people. Okay. I think that's a pretty good explanation of what we're doing here. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I'm so excited to dive into these topics.
Okay, me too. So next, since you guys are going to be listening to Adrian and I chat so much, we're going to take a few minutes to just introduce ourselves and tell you about why we're so passionate about this mission that we're on. So Adrian, I'm going to have you go first. I'd love it if you would just tell us about your background, any relevant experiences that have brought you here, and why you are so excited about helping adults understand how to become someone who knows how to kindle this love of learning or curiosity or motivation in kids.
Yes, thank you, Kaity. This is part of a journey, right? We are always learning and growing and just discovering how to kindle and add to the big fires in our kids. So I am a mom to 3 boys, and they're ages 13, 10, and 6. I'm a wife, a daughter, a friend, and I've always been interested in humans. behavior. I remember reading a book. It was called something around genomes in ninth grade and being so excited and going to my friends and then quickly put it in my backpack and they looked at me like I was crazy. I've always had this fascination around like why we behave a certain way.
I mean, you can't be like learning stuff at school. That's not cool.
I know, right? And a big piece of that is looking back, like, why did I not go into the field of psychology or sociology or something like that? And it's honestly because I didn't feel smart. I had straight A's, which is interesting, but I always just thought, oh, I just worked really, really hard and had to work way harder than anyone else. But I did not do well on standardized tests, which in my mind equaled I am dumb, which is not. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, growth mindset and neuroplasticity, and my brain's always growing. And only if I knew those things in high school.
Messages just weren't available to you in your youth, right?
No, but they are now. So I have definitely, I feel like, rekindled my own fire to learn everything I can about the brain and about my own kids. So when I had my first son, I had all these things in my mind of how parenting was going to be. I read all the books and it's like, you do this, the child's going to behave this way. And I would go to mom groups and they would just talk about 1, 2, 3 magic and positive discipline and all these things. If we do this, our child will behave this way. And everything was all around behavior. Well, my child did not do and behave in those ways. I remember when he was about 2.5. Yeah, he was probably about 2.5. He literally would run in the living room and slam himself into the wall and try knocking himself out.
Oh my goodness.
I had no idea what to do. I was like, I'm a terrible mom. He's not behaving in the way I did 1 and 2 and 3 and it wasn't working. And so I remember asking his daycare providers, he's running into walls. I don't know what to do. And you know what they told me? They said, well, don't let him do it.
Oh my goodness. That's maybe not the most helpful response. What do you wish they would have asked you or suggested?
Yeah, I wish they would have asked why. Why is he doing that? Because now I know he's neurodivergent. So what neurodivergence means is just brain functions and behaviors are it's like differently wired. And he has ADHD and he's gifted. And then my other 2 kids also probably have lots of different labels that we can apply. But like I said, spectrum-y, gifted, they just think and they experience the world differently than neurotypical kids. And because of that, then I really started diving into learning about the brain. The very first book I read was called The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Tina Payne Bryson. They have a ton of books, highly recommend. That was it. I was so excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. It's not about the end result of what the behavior is, but it's understanding why he's doing it and connecting on that neurological level and understanding where my kids are in their nervous systems. And because they're neurodivergent, they behave in way bigger ways. They're way more intense. And what I learned is, as you can see how animated I am and intense I am, I'm neurodivergent too. It just felt like, oh my gosh, someone understands me. So then I had all of these ideas and all of this knowledge inside my brain that I wanted to get out. So I started a blog called Raising Kids with Purpose and started connecting with parents, then became a parent coach. And then with my kids' education journey, they started just in a traditional school. My husband and I didn't really know of any other options in our area. And also we were both traditionally educated. So we were like, well, this is the way our school was. Yeah. But the school that my oldest went to, remember the kid running into the walls to try to get proprioceptive input? He was being forced to sit with his feet flat on the floor and his hands folded on his desk for hours a day. Well, it didn't go so well. So eventually we found Prenda and they went to a micro school and then we just didn't turn back. We have had different education environments since then. All 3 of my kids go to 3 different kind of schools that works best for them. And it's really a whole child approach.
That's awesome. So I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
What would you say in all of the educational environments that your kids have been in, what are some of the key factors that have like created an environment where your kids could learn and be successful?
Connection. Honestly, having an adult not care about the behavior, kind of like what I was talking about, but really understanding why they're behaving that way and connect. So even in the traditional school, my oldest had a teacher in second grade who was phenomenal at this. And even talking to other parents who the year before their kids were constantly losing recess, constantly getting in trouble, punishments, and the behaviors were not changing. And we would talk and they're like, oh my gosh, like we never get emails from her. I don't even know what's going on. And then walking into her classroom, she just had this magic. Like I can't even explain it. She really got to know the kids and who they were. So the education environments that they're in we have one kid in a hybrid school, one in a Montessori, and one home educated. And in all three environments, there are adults that truly know who my kids are and really understand them. And then because they're able to connect with them on that level, they've really been able to learn and grow because their brains are safer.
Yeah. So something that you said that really stood out to me was that it wasn't necessarily the educational environment. Your example was from just a traditional classroom, right? It was the nature of relationship that really determined the quality and your child's ability to learn and to feel safe there. And I think what I learned from that example is that the ideas, the principles, the science, the research, the art of kindling is not specific to a location, right? You can take these ideas and you can apply them if you are a soccer coach, or if you're a traditional classroom teacher, if you're a principal, if you're a micro school leader, if you've started your own school. They're just so transferable. And that's one of the main reasons we wanted to focus on all of this, because there's so much great stuff out there that we can learn and apply, and we can affect millions and millions of kids simply by changing the way the adults in their life interact with them, right? We don't have to change the whole learning environment or anything. It's really about this adult-child relationship.
It is a big paradigm shift because our culture is baked in this power over, or this do as I say, or adultism. And we're realizing how detrimental that is to development, especially when those children become adults. And we look at the mental health crisis. So what we're doing here is super important to really help people understand that this kindling that we're talking about is not just, oh, let's just go Kindle, but it's really impactful and transformative.
100%. Okay, so I have one more follow-up question.
Yeah.
It seems like you are just so motivated to help people understand these ideas. You're a parenting coach. You're just constantly learning. So I'm wondering, like, what is it? Like, where is this passion coming from? Why do you want to work so hard to help people understand these things?
I think part of it, honestly, is my OCD. I do have clinical OCD. I don't just say I'm OCD. And I like to feed that. But then also, I probably have OCD because of my childhood. My first 5 years of life was very tumultuous, my parents worked all the time. We were left alone a lot. And I wasn't parented in this connective way. And honestly, whenever I then moved in with my dad when I was about 5 or 6, and he worked all the time, and he didn't have these tools and this knowledge. Right. And that, honestly, I have to mention too, which is so amazing to me, is my dad's in his 60s now, and he's helping raise my sister's baby. Like, she works, and so he is his full-time care provider. And he's reading all of the books. He's watching videos by psychologists, and he's relearning how to be this kind of parent that it would have been great to have, but honestly, it was part of my journey.
So true. So true. And all of the research and science behind all this stuff, it's really only come into like the main social sphere or understanding with the advent of like functional MRIs and brains, like neuroscience and stuff like that. So a lot of us in this generation that are parenting young children now, we weren't raised by people that had access to this information, right? No one knew. So something else that's really important to kind of hammer home here is that as we go through this journey of learning, we do not want to cause any sort of like shame right? We want to approach learning from a place of like radical self-compassion and just understand that when we know better, we can do better and we can just move on. We don't have to like wallow in our mistakes, as I like to sometimes do. It's a big waste of energy, but very common.
Human.
Yes, totally. So the goal here again is not to like have a shame fest at all. It's just to understand and to do better and to move forward.
And not to overwhelm you with all of the neuroscience and all the jargon, but really break it down and give you practical ways to apply this in your home, in your classrooms, in your team, on the field, wherever you interact with kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, Kaity, it's your turn. I can't wait to hear your story. Can you please share with us?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. Your story.
Okay. Yeah. So I have 4 kids currently, 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 10-year-old. It's hard to do that because in a few months we'll just be on all of the evens. It'll be like 4, 6, 8, 10, but the 3 really throws me off. So it'll be easier later. Okay. So I'm a mom. And before I was a mom, I was a speech language pathologist. So I went to grad school and thought I was just going to spend my whole life in an elementary school. And I was going to help all of those little kids learn how to not lisp and how to say their R's and not stutter and all of these fun language things. And so I started as a speech language pathologist in the schools and lots of really good things going on. And then some other things that I noticed that kind of made me scratch my head a little bit, which we'll get into along the way, I'm sure. But essentially, I only spent a very short amount of time in schools before I decided to make a career shift out of school-based speech language pathology and into the medical world. So instead of working with young people at the beginning of their life careers, I started working with stroke victims that had neurological damage to the language centers of their brain. And this was such an interesting switch to see kind of like the beginning of life and kind of closer to the end of life, working with elderly people. And I just learned so much from that like pendulum shift. And what I noticed, my big take home, was that as a speech language pathologist in schools, 90% of my time was spent bribing kids to do things. What sticker will you work for? What kind of candy? What kind of game can I, turn this work into so that you will want to participate in it? And then when I was working with stroke victims, they were paying lots of money to talk to me, right? And they were asking me for extra homework. And when I would walk by their hall, or when I would walk down the hall in the hospital, they would call out to me, "Kaity, do you have 5 minutes? Can you just come work with me for 5 minutes?" They were so motivated to get better, right? So then I stopped working. All of this is happening while I was pregnant with my first. And so I had my baby and just kind of started wondering, honestly, what I was going to do for my kids for their educational journey, because I wanted them to, no one ever complains about a 3 or 4-year-old like not being curious enough, right? It's the opposite. Mm-hmm. Why won't they stop asking me questions? I'll do that. I can't.
Why?
Yeah. Like the curiosity is like level 11, right? But then if you look at the studies, like that tapers off pretty quickly as soon as kids start going to school. And I didn't want that to happen to my kids. So I started doing all of this research into the psychology of motivation and education and the history of education and all sorts of things. So once my oldest was kind of getting closer to be school aged, I had 3 more kids by then. So I have a busy full house, and I decided to homeschool. And through that journey, I discovered all sorts of different pedagogies and approaches to education and just saw that there were lots of different ways to do things, right? There's not one right answer. There's not one right fit. And so somewhere along the way, I ran into Kelly Smith, who is the founder and CEO of Prenda. And when I met him, this was 2018, 5 years ago, he had 6 kids in a micro school that he had just pulled out. His kids and a few of the neighborhood kids came along to try this micro school with him. And I met him and quickly just knew that I was supposed to spend all of my energy getting micro schools up and running, because I saw the power of what we've been talking about, this connection and the greater levels of autonomy that you can have in a smaller group. And then the motivation, remember, that was like kind of the core of what I had noticed in the schools versus working with elderly, the motivation factor. So I saw how a micro school like solved a lot of those problems, right? As a homeschooler, I felt very isolated and like I needed more support. I was struggling, feeling like I could teach my kids. I needed them to be away from me sometimes, but not too much. And when I was working in the schools, it's just so easy to get lost in a big sea of kids, right? So this was like such a healthy hybrid in my view. So I just dove in, and for the last 5 years, I've been working to build a learning system that's really built on all of this science and research around autonomy and connection and ownership and personalization, all of these things that we know from the research to be educational and relational best practices, but aren't really happening in our homes or in our classrooms.
As you're talking, I'm like, what questions can I even ask her? And then you would just start answering the questions I had in my head. So that was so rich and so good. And what I'm hearing too is what's powerful is the individualization versus just the group dynamics, or, teach to all, because we're all so unique. Even with like the neurodivergent movement, they're realizing more and more people. I mean, we're all in a way neurodivergent. We're all so unique and different from each other, but we've been trying to put us all into one box to mention it from the beginning, and it just doesn't work. So individualization definitely was coming up for me as you were talking. So what would you, or like, how do you think that you like got to this place? Like, what's that inner fire that's driving you?
Okay.
The inner spark.
Totally. So I was raised, I'm the youngest in my family, and I had lots of siblings, and some of those siblings did wonderfully well in school, and others of those siblings did not. They will remain nameless. But I saw how differently my parents treated those that succeeded academically and those who did not. And I was just kind of middle of the road. I wasn't a genius. I wasn't like some savant. Like
but you're very insightful. To even notice that is pretty insightful, you have to say.
Yeah. And the other thing about my home is, well, it was definitely a very safe place. I don't think I had wonderful parents and a good family, and I'm so grateful for that. But there were just kind of these very subtle undertones of culture that were very instructive to me at a pretty subconscious level. So we're not like a very emotional family, like not very connective. We're not like hugging and saying I love you all the time. In fact, we did not ever say I love you, ever. It was just not in our family vocabulary, not at all.
Wow.
And so
I could like feel knowing how important that is up here, but then also feeling how important that is.
Right. And there are lots of different ways to show love, right? I felt cared for, I felt provided for. It was just not a verbal affirmation that I was loved. So what I noticed though, I had this experience, like I said, I wasn't like a genius, and I never got straight A's. I was always kind of just like a B+ kid, I was nice.
Almost there. Just almost.
Close, really close to good enough to be left. And then I had this experience where I got straight A's finally. And I told my dad, and he said, "That's excellent. I love you." And I was like, oh my gosh, that was the ticket the whole time, is getting straight A's. He needed this like academic perfection in order to bequeath his love verbally. And the sad thing about this is that I was a junior in college.
Oh my gosh, Katie.
So I had to wait my entire life to hear those words, because I could not manage to get straight A's. I don't know I probably could have, but I kind of just didn't care about like getting all the points, right? I was really I loved learning. I was very curious. I was hardworking, but I just didn't care about getting all of the points, playing the game of school enough to get the A. So that was...
I was all about the game. then I had to undo some of the perfectionism and all the things and the people pleasing, and because I was all about the points.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's hard not to be. And that's the only thing that's kind of like given to kids, right? And it's so pervasive. I was thinking about this a while ago, and it's literally like, if you think about all of the different mechanisms that we use to control kids, it's just like cause and effect pinball. Like they wake up and they're just bouncing from different little cause and effects and control mechanisms in their life till they go to sleep. And they don't have a lot of time to just like be loved and accepted and feel grounded. And
so many of those are demands. And like with my one son, he has pathological demand avoidance. So every single one of those pings sends him into this fight or flight. And for him, it's fight. So now that we understand, okay, let's help them get out of this pinball machine. And like you said, it doesn't take a whole lot of just presence, really.
And so that's what, as I started having little kids, I was thinking, okay, how do I be different, right? Because it's so subconsciously programmed into me. I started calling it merit-based love, where I just could not allow myself to love my kids completely. I mean, we all say like, we love our kids unconditionally, but when it really comes down to it, there are kind of some subtle things internally where you're like, I wish you were doing these other things. And then it would be really easy to be excited and proud of you and to tell the neighbors about you and things like that. It's just really how our kids kind of internalize or perceive our love, right? And so I got this book in the mail one day, and I had 3 little kids at this time, and I was just so tired and so busy and just trying really hard to be a good mom and trying to conquer all of these kind of subconscious things we've talked about. And I had a little boy who was just not attached to me. And it's understandable because him and his older brother are very close together. So when he was born, I still had an 18-month-old, so I would nurse him, and then I'd give him to his dad. And he formed this really beautiful attachment with his dad, which is awesome. But he would tell me things like, I have 1 million hugs in me for dad, and I have 0 hugs in me for you.
Oh,
it was not my favorite because I was the one doing all of the work all day long to take care of him. So
and you deserve those hugs.
I know, that's like the currency of motherhood, right?
Yes.
So I got this book in the mail randomly. It was Becky Bailey's, what's it called? Easy to Love, Difficult to Discipline. And it was like an old used copy. I had no idea who sent it to me. I called my mom. Sometimes she sends me random books, and she's like, I've never heard of that book. It's not me. And it just felt like a mistake. And so I literally had this moment where I was hovering over the garbage can to throw this weird book that I got away. Yeah. And something told me like, don't throw that book away.
Had you heard of Becky Bailey before?
No, never.
Oh my gosh.
I never heard of anything. Like I was just I think the last parenting book that I had read was How to Parenting a Strong-Willed Child, which is all about very structured cause and effect consequences and things like that. So that's where I was at in my parenting journey. And then so I just put it on the shelf. And then it was like a year later that I was like, I don't have anything to read right now. So I just pulled it out and started reading it. Changed my stinking life. It was mind blowing. And then it referenced lots of different books in there. And I just went on this little train of finding out all of this other.
Isn't it? I mean, it's like you can't stop. Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh. I had lots of those moments too. And it's incredible. I know exactly what you're describing. I could feel it viscerally in my body right now.
Totally. So I just, having not had these things and then learning about them and seeing the power of these ideas and principles and ways of being in my own life, it's been healing for me as a person. And it's been wonderful to be able to know how to create a culture of connection and intrinsic motivation and responsibility in my kids with, because I didn't have that. I didn't know the path and I didn't have the skills. So through all of this learning, I feel like very inspired and very equipped to create this for my own family. And now as a parenting coach to help others do the same.
That's amazing. You're taking your healing and it's transferring it to other people and say, hey, come along on this journey and we'll see transformation together. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a pleasure to be here with you. I'm so happy that we're doing this project together. I feel like
I am too.
we're just going to learn so much. So that's it for today. We hope that you've enjoyed the very first episode of KindlED. On the next episode, Adrian and I are going to do our first topic deep dive, so you're not going to want to miss it.
We have some reminders to share with you. First, we want to encourage you to subscribe to KindlED wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review, rate us, share our episode on social media, tag us. It's at Prenda, Prenda, learn. For more KindlED content, head over to prenda.com/resources and subscribe to the KindlED newsletter. And then second, we love to invite you to submit questions or challenges you're having via email. All you need to do is email podcast@prenda.com. If you have any kind of struggles, challenges, anything that you would love for Kaity and I to address, we will help coach you through it. And then we also have a ton of resources, as we have been describing all the books and different things that we have learned along our journey that we would love to share with you.
Thanks for listening, and remember to keep kindling.